Thank you for joining us today to Differentiating Instruction in the World Language Classroom. This is our on-demand version of the webinar. Today we have with us Giselle Falls from Virginia Beach Public Schools. Giselle is a Spanish teacher and department chair of world languages in the Global Studies and World Language Academy at Tallwood High School in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Giselle has over 20 years of experience, and she is a self-directed, enthusiastic educator with a strong commitment to student development and the learning experience. Her skills include designing challenging, enriching, and innovative lessons that address the needs of students. Giselle is finishing her master's in Spanish language and culture at the University of Salamanca. For today's discussion, we will focus on the following areas: an overview of the Global Studies and World Language Academy at Tallwood High School, blended learning means in the world language classroom, world language teachers already using technology successfully, lesson design and strategies to help differentiate classroom instruction. Once again, thank you for giving us your time and attention, and let's get started. Giselle, I'm turning things over to you now.
Great. Well, hello everybody. Again, my name is Giselle Falls, and I am teach at Tallwood High School, Virginia Beach, Virginia. And I want to share some of my knowledge and my experience in the classroom with you, and I hope that you are to enjoy this webinar and that you will come away with some good information that you can use in your classroom. The learning target for today is what I want you to know is to discover how easy and effective it is to implement language learning technology into the traditional classroom using a blended learning approach. So a little bit about me. I teach in Virginia Beach City Public Schools, and I know the slide says that we're the second largest school division in the state of Virginia, but I've found out recently that we're actually the fourth largest school division in Virginia with over 69,000 students. And I am very fortunate to teach in a high school that is focused on world languages and global studies. And our school is a school within a school. We have approximately 100 students per grade level in our academy, and the students here are they attend because they're passionate about language study and global cultures and issues. The Global Studies and World Languages Academy at Tallwood High School hopes to prepare students to contribute to the world community through multicultural and international perspectives in languages, geography, history, politics, and economics. This world-class education will create the world-class citizens of tomorrow. So this graphic, the visual shows the global connections of our academy. All of the themes that students study are integrated into their courses. Through this study, they learn what it means not to just be an American citizen, but what it means to become a world citizen, students who are aware and sensitive to the needs of others. That's what we strive for at this academy. The ability to understand and communicate in more than one language is central to building confident and responsible citizens in a global economy. Academy students at Tallwood High School study 2 world languages other than English, and they choose from the current offerings that you see in front of you. In addition, all of the language students at Tallwood High School receive a Rosetta Stone account, and our academy students receive an account for the language that they're studying, as well as what we call a choice language. Because our academy students have many, many opportunities to travel, a lot of them will choose to study a language that, using the Rosetta Stone account, will help them with the travel opportunities. So even though we may not offer a face-to-face language in our school, we offer Rosetta Stone, and students have an opportunity to study a different language, especially if they're planning on traveling and they're interested in learning a language from a country that we have student delegates go. And I'll be talking about this a little bit later on. The International Exchange is a program that we offer here through our academy, and students have an opportunity to travel. And these aren't trips where they're just going as tourists. Our students actually do homestays, and they live in the home of a host family. They go to school with these students. They participate in doing presentations, and our students oftentimes will present in the target language of the country they're visiting. Our delegates travel anywhere from a week to 3 weeks, and this is a wonderful experience for them because they get to use the language that they study in a very authentic setting. So some of the pictures that you see here, we have delegates to the Northern Ireland. We have students who travel to Israel. In the bottom left corner, there's a student who traveled to the Philippines last year. In the center, there are students with the delegates in Washington, D.C., and I believe this last picture is in China. The challenge that we meet with offering languages and having some of the requirements that we need to have for our students to graduate, having the Rosetta Stone program helps us to meet some of the requirements of the Global Studies in World Languages Academy, so that the students in our program are required to take 4 years of one language and 2 years of another. And so having this program allows them to reinforce some of the areas of weakness. It helps them to, some of our students actually work on Rosetta Stone in the summer prior to coming into school. As I said before, they're very passionate about their language study, so it's not unusual for them to begin working on their language study in the summertime. In addition, because they can choose a choice language, as I said before, many of the kids will choose a language of a country that they are interested in visiting or spending some time. And many of them have already thought about study abroad programs, either in high school or especially in their college years. In addition, it helps us to grow the language programs at our school. And students understand that knowing another language helps them with their study, helps them to understand the culture. It gives them a broader opportunity for career opportunities and of course, just their personal interests. So I'll be talking to you today about blended learning and what it means in the world languages classroom. And as I've been doing some research on blended learning, there's so many definitions, and at times it can be really confusing. Recently I attended a couple of conferences, one with INACOL in Orlando, and then of course ACTFL for foreign language teachers that was held in San Diego. And blended learning and the use of technology in the classroom is huge. And of course that my interest is in how do I use blended learning or technology in the world languages classroom. So looking at this definition, blended learning combines classroom learning with online learning, in which students can in part control the time, the pace, and place of their learning, and where teachers determine the combination that works for them and for their students. And I think that's really key, is what works for you and what works for your students is how you incorporate technology in your classroom. So implementing technology, it's really important that consider how you're going to do this. What are the logistics? First of all, the technology has to complement the classroom study. Using technology can help to grow those language offerings. Many times in certain school systems, you may only be able to offer 2 or 3 different languages, if that. And so having the use of technology helps to broaden that and to offer other opportunities for students. as I talked about before, it helps give students the opportunity to work on their skills even prior to coming into the school. It helps to expand the study beyond the classroom, and of course it reinforces those language skills. So why do we blend? Using blended learning helps us with all sorts of things. Many of us have large classes. Your students get bored because they're so used to everything being immediate, and these are the students of they're the technology generation. So they're used to a change of activity, and they're used to things being very immediate and different. When you blend, when you use technology and different activities in the classroom, your students are more apt to take risks. It's much easier for students to step out of their comfort zone when they're working in a small group than when they are in a large group setting, especially when they're taking a foreign language and having to pronounce words that are different, and they might feel uncomfortable about what they're saying and unsure. Another positive is that the contact that you have with your students is maximized because it gives you much more time to work with those kids that really need that one-on-one assistance. You are able to vary your activities. There's so many different activities that you can do when you're using a blended learning approach. And you can address all the skills. You can address the reading, the writing, speaking, listening, and even culture. This meme I find kind of cute because it's really what my students look like whenever we start a new activity. So that movie, Men in Black, where they erase everyone's mental or their memories, that's kind of what they do when you give them directions, especially if you're giving them the directions in the target language and they have no idea what you're talking about. So it's really important that your directions are clear, detailed, that they're organized. Your directions and your learning environment has to be challenging. It needs to be relevant and respectful. It has to be at the proper level of proficiency so that you make sure if you're working with a group of students that are in the novice mid or novice high range that you're not giving them activities that are novice low or intermediate mid. So we want to make sure that the students are challenged and you give them, push them a little bit, but not so much that they get, that they tune out or that the wall goes up because they're frustrated. Your expectations for them need to be very clear. The students need to know what they're going to be required to do, so they need to know that learning target. They also need to know how they're going to be held accountable. So if you're going to give them an activity at the end that the entire class is going to do, whether it be a performance-based assessment or some type of quiz or summative assessment, they need to know what that is. And finally, there has to be some kind of time limit or you lose your students if you spend too much time or actually not enough time. So what are the logistics? Now, you know what you want to do, you know what the skills are, and it's really difficult because teachers face so many different challenges. You might not have your own classroom. You may have to use a cart going from room to room. Your classroom may be too small. It may be too big. You have a limited amount of technology, or you may not have any technology at all. Where can you find activities? Your time is limited. You have too much to grade. There's just so many different things that get in the way. But what I wanted to show today is that with some proper planning and organization, you can start planning and preparing for using blended learning as soon as today or tomorrow. It just takes that extra time in the beginning, and once you've done it, you have it forever. So there are different types of stations that I'm going to talk about. One uses all types of skills, so reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Another, you could just focus on certain concepts like vocabulary concepts or grammar. You could also focus on a skill if you just want to focus on reading. In my school, we have literacy as a school-wide goal, and it's a focus in our school. So I might do centers one day on literacy and reading. You could also focus strictly on vocabulary if that's something that your students need to do. Then there are a couple different ways that you can set up stations. One is where you have students work and move at their own pace. And another is where students rotate on a timer, which is set by the teacher. Now, I have a tendency to use the first one, where students work and move at their own pace. I find that for me, this works better, and I'm able to maximize that teacher contact with my students. I learned of a new way to do stations just today, and it was pretty exciting, so I'm hoping to be able to set that up. It's the flipped classroom, but it's using flipped classroom inside the class. So it's not going outside of the classroom. And that's something that can be incorporated into using stations as well. So what are some of the resources you can use when you are trying to think of how to do stations? What does this look like? You have a smartboard, Promethean boards, iPads and iPods. Your students have their own devices they can bring to class. You can use handouts that you have, things that other teachers have given you that you don't have time to use. You can use tweets, having students listen to authentic sources. You can set up a station with games and flashcards and Quizlet. I love to have a station set up with just Rosetta Stone. My students use their books and workbooks that we don't often use in class. I also use the whiteboard or the chalkboard, and one of my colleagues is a great technology guru for our department, and she sets up stations with QR codes. So there's just a wealth of different ways that you can use stations and blended learning, and it's really only limited by your own imagination and creativity. So in this next slide, you'll see some pictures of the logistics, how I set up the station. So looking at the very first slide, it shows these manila folders, and this is how simply I do it. You can take manila folder, or you can use a large envelope and you put all of your materials inside of it. And I like to write the directions very clearly on the outside. Depending on the level, I will do the directions either in English or Spanish. Of course, if you do the directions in Spanish, it has to be very simple, and because you don't want to have to go around explaining directions to everybody each time they use it. The directions are there, and I make sure that at the beginning I explain to them that they need to read very carefully, because some stations will tell them to do the work in writing, some will tell them to do the work listening or simply responding, or they may have to use a digital recorder. There's just a lot of different activities going on at the same time, so it's really important that they read. I also have whiteboards and markers, erasers, all of the things that they need in order to work within that station. So if you look at the bottom under the pictures of the actual manila folders, you'll see the setup of my classroom. And I like to put the students in groups of 3 or 4. 4 seems to be a pretty good number, because sometimes you can have them work in pairs. It's really important that you determine how you want to group your students. If you're grouping them by ability, or if you're grouping them by mixed ability, the benefit of grouping them by like ability is that the students can work together, they can help each other, and there's not one student or maybe 2 students that are doing all the work and the other 2 are just copying everything they're doing. Mixed ability, depending on the activities that you're doing, may work as well. In the top and the middle, you'll see 2 students that are working, several students working on Rosetta Stone. I have the 2 boys at the top. They have a tendency to like to do independent work. They're not really fond of working in groups. So I used the Center with Technology, with Rosetta Stone in this case, to as sort of a caveat for those students if they're wanting to I know that they like doing Rosetta Stone, so I ask them to do 1 or 2 stations prior to that, and then I give them a limited amount of time in the area that they like. In the top section, they are, I simply took a handout that another teacher had shared with me that had, in this particular unit, we were studying reflexive verbs and what do you do in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, etc. And they had to take these little bubbles that you see cut out and put them in a particular order, and then they had to write complete sentences talking about their daily routine. In the bottom, the students are working on a reading activity where they had to read a paragraph about a student's daily activities, a daily routine, and highlight. They were using highlighters to highlight new words and look at the context. So in this on this particular day, we were working on a variety of skills and concepts. They were working on the daily routine with vocabulary. They were learning how to conjugate, or actually not learning, but practicing conjugating reflexive verbs to talk about their daily routine. They were listening in, actually on Rosetta Stone, they were using the unit that was on reflexive verbs. So I was able to tie it all together, and it worked very well for them. In this next set of slides, again, it's a different class, but the same activity where we're doing reflexive verbs. In the top one, they're playing a game that's called a oca, y tiro porque me toca. And that means from goose to goose, and then I'll throw the dice because it's my turn. It doesn't rhyme in English, but in Spanish it's quite fun. So they go around the board, and on the board there is a reflexive verb. They have to conjugate the reflexive verb. I have them write it on the whiteboard, and depending on their skill level, for the lower ability learners, I'm strictly having them conjugate the verb correctly. And then as they get better with this, to differentiate, I'm scaffolding for them. They have to start with a verb, and then they have to use it in a sentence, and then use it in a question. So I'm going from that simple to complex, and eventually the idea is that they would be able to have a real-life, authentic conversation. At the bottom, the girls are playing the same game. They were getting pretty animated. And in the bottom right, this is a handout where I just cut strips of activities, and the students are putting it in a logical order of sequential order. This next slide, I'm not quite sure how well you can see it, but it shows it's the same idea. There are 2 activities here. On the left is a person who is in bed, and it takes us through his day and how he goes through the day, what he does, in the morning, afternoon, and evening. And what's really neat about this is I did not create this on the left. I found it on Pinterest, and I just searched reflexive verbs in Spanish. The reason I put it here is because I wanted you to see that it's such an easy activity to incorporate into a blended learning classroom. With this activity, it's the same on top and on bottom. I made a copy of it, I cut it in 2, and I gave it to, I set it up as a station. So what the students had to do, they opened the folder and read the directions that explained to them, in this station, I want you to tell me what the student is doing. Pretend that you're the student and what you are doing from the time you get up until the time you go to bed. And on the right side of the column, for all the verbs that they use, they have to put it in sequential order, and they have to conjugate properly. The other thing you could do with this, you could have students do a writing activity. You could have them record on their computer and send it to you. There's just a number of things they can do with this. On the right side, this came from a program, I think it was called Imagination. And again, it was something that I had, and I printed several copies to put into the station, and the students worked on a graphic organizer for a pre-writing activity. In this next slide, we're going to show a short video that just demonstrates how, shows me working with some of my students as they are working in these stations.
Generalmente yo me levanto a las 7 yo me despierto con mi despertador para empezar mi día. Y luego yo, la forma de yo. ¿Cuál es el verbo? ¿Este? Sí. Yo, el verbo es ir. ¿Cuál es la forma de yo?
Va a ir al baño.
Yo
voy a ir al baño.
no necesita ir. Yo voy al baño.
Yo voy al baño.
Okay.
Porque yo necesito mi duda.
Yo necesito me. Exacto. Okay, repite la frase.
Luego yo voy al baño porque necesito ducharme.
Exacto.
Yo me ducho antes de yo cepillarse mi pelo y
Yo cepillarse es importante.
sorry, cepillarme yo me cepillo mi pelo y secarme mi pelo.
Y conjugar verbo. Me cepillo y me
Secarme.
no. Esta forma de yo.
In this slide, it shows the anchor. Anchor is basically what this is tying everything together. So I talked about making the activities when you're using blended learning, that it needs to be authentic and real and respectful. But it also needs to give students, they need to know how they're going to be held accountable. So this is how I hold them accountable. In the anchor, you can do several things. One, in this picture in the center, it shows a close activity. This is very low level, simple activity. If you want to bring the entire class together and show them a video, this video, Los Verbos Reflexivos, it's a YouTube video that I found, and it's a song about a guy who, it's a great song, and your students would love it, but it's, he talks about getting up in the morning and his wife fixes him breakfast, and he uses all the reflexive verbs. So this close activity goes along with the reflexive verbs. So that would be a good practice. It's not something that I would grade, but certainly would show me whether they're understanding how to put those reflexive verbs together and what they've practiced within their groups. In the anchor, the final I would use as a summative assessment is the performance-based assessment. And in this one in particular, the students had to have a dialogue with a friend, and they have no idea who the person is going to be that I select for them. They have lots of opportunities to practice, and using the blended learning approach gives them those different practices. You could set up a station where, you ask them to record a conversation with their partner about their morning routine or their afternoon routine or their evening routine. So they have that practice. And once you inform them that they're going to be doing this performance-based assessment and these are the areas they need to cover, so you'll see on the sheet, I hope that you can see it, that it's scaffolded. And there it says, make sure you talk about these things. So once they know that I often will share this with them prior to going into stations. This is what you're going to need to be able to do. And they know what that learning target is for the day, but they also know what is going to be expected of them at the end of the unit of study. And I use our citywide rubric for interpersonal speaking. There's an example of this here, and this is what we use in Virginia Beach. So the students are very accustomed to this rubric based on the actual proficiency guidelines. It's really, it's really important that you have some type of anchor at the end. I talked a little bit before about how important it is for student accountability. One of the ways that you can do that is through a completion form. And sometimes I print out something for the students, but it can be as simple as you have your students take out a piece of paper, write every member of the group's name on the paper. You write station 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many you have. And then as they complete the work and you come around and listen to what they have to do, or look at any writing that they did, or there's just a number of ways that you can check their work. You sign their paper, or you can use a stamp and stamp it. You can also give them an exit ticket, and the measurable assessment would be the performance-based assessment at the end of the unit, whether it be a speaking assessment, a reading, a writing, a listening, or all of the above. Again, if the activities are challenging and relevant and at the proficiency level, your students are going to feel very successful at the end of this. They need to understand that when they're doing these types of activities, there's a purpose. And I like to explain to my students the real-life applications. Just the other day, we were doing an activity with the Day of Coding, and my students participated with our computer resource specialist who came in and taught the class along with me, and we were showing the kids how to do coding in Spanish. And it was great because they had never done this before in English. Many of them had never done it before, but we had them do the coding using the directions in Spanish. And so there was a lot of learning going on, but also they were understanding that it was important to use trial and error, that sometimes you have to fail and try something again and not quit. So that was very much a relevant activity, that they could see the relevance in it. They could see, yes, it was definitely challenging for them, and it was at their proficiency level, if not a little bit higher. But it pushed them to learn, and my students learned some great words for directions in Spanish. And now we're going to show you a little bit of what the students in my class have to say about using stations and using technology in the blended classroom.
Karsten, can you tell me why you like stations or centers in the language class?
One thing that I like about centers is the fact that we get to interact with people. So many language teachers, they have us learning a lot of grammar, but not interacting with enough people. Therefore, we learn more social skills when we're learning the language also.
The reason I like centers is because there's different learning techniques with each center. So when you play a game and you speak, when you write stuff down, when you're reading, so different comprehensions and the way to absorb.
Tomas, what do you like about doing centers?
I like doing the centers because there's so many different activities that you get to do, so you're not just working on like one thing. You get to work on reading, writing, speaking, and I think that really helps in learning a language as opposed to sitting here and having the teacher just consistently tell you what to do and what to learn.
Thank you. Chicas, ¿puedes decir por qué te gusta hacer centros o estaciones en la clase de español?
A mí me gusta porque es muy divertido, podemos hablar con nuestras amigas.
También nosotros podemos levantar y mover. Sí.
This concludes our session. of differentiating instruction in the world language classroom. We can continue the conversation in our social media. Please let us know how you're using blended learning in your classroom by visiting us in Twitter and Facebook. Thanks again for joining us today. Thank you, Giselle, for being part of this on-demand webinar. If you have any questions or you would like to connect with Giselle directly, you can see her contact information here on the screen. Again, thank you for joining us. If you would like to learn additional information about how Rosetta Stone could support you in your classroom, please contact us or visit us at rosettastone.com/K12. Thank you, and you have a great day.